Hey everybody, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini. Welcome to WIP Wednesday, episode number 106 or 107. So 107 is so hard to keep track now that we're already over into the hundreds. I'm coming to y'all from my home crafting studio for another episode where I am going to be actually doing a bit of a live demo, showing you a couple of finished samples featuring my Crafty Gemini 10-inch slicer ruler. And so before we go ahead and get started, let's just double check in the chat. If you can see me and hear me, just let me know where you're tuning in from in the chat box, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube. I'm pulling up my chat here in front today, and I can see we have a bunch of people on already. Annette from Kentucky. Hi, Annette. Alicia from Georgia. We got Devoria in the house from, oops, it already passed me, from Georgia as well. Kathy from Georgia. We got a lot of people from Georgia today. Awesome. Hi, Margie, tuning in from Wisconsin. Ooh, hi, Francoise. She's tuning in from the Swiss mountains. Awesome. And I see Roberta's in the house from San Diego, California. So hi. All right, y'all, we are going to get started. I am bringing back a throwback template. Those of you that have been with me for a long time probably have one, maybe two of these rulers. You may have been one of the first ones that got it back when I designed it and got it manufactured right here in the US in 2015, okay? This is the Crafty Gemini 10-inch slicer, and we're bringing back an oldie but a goodie that I have taught before. It's actually a free video course that you can access once you buy my ruler. And I need to make some throw pillows for the couch because every year we have a Halloween party, and this year I decided I have a couple table runners done. I'm now going to make throw pillows for the couch, so why not turn it into a WIP Wednesday demo? So let's go ahead and give everybody my over-the-shoulder camera shot here, and let's get started. All right. Ooh, awesome. Okay, great. I see Susie says she can see me and hear me, and Margie says, I love the slicer. Okay, I'm going to scoot that out the way for now. Let me lighten this up a little bit. I might have to touch it up a bit because depending on the color of the fabric that I'm working on, that I'm working with, it throws the white balance of the camera off. Okay, so let me reach over here first and grab my two samples. Again, if you've been with me for a long time, you're probably well familiar with these projects. So this is the one that I make in the tutorial. We basically have a video library of archived ways that you can use my 10-inch slicer ruler. And if you don't yet have it, if you're one of the few that has not had this for years, the link is in the description box below, as well as in the caption if you're catching us on Facebook, okay? So I remember, do y'all remember, those of you that were in my first original Crafty Gemini Quilt Club? I was so obsessed with this fabric when it came out. We got it, I think, in a bundle in a quilty box, and you could get my ruler with it. And this was a 10-inch by 10-inch square pack of these amazing fabrics. I was obsessed with this collection. And so we basically were talking about, and this is how I teach it in the course, is picking a light and a dark so that you have that high contrast of what ends up being one of the little blocks. So this is one block. And then it's sewn and connected here so that the points match to another block. So you can see that this plays as the light and the crisscross X here plays as the dark, or I should say the purple fabric that I use for that crisscross X plays as the dark. And then on the other block, the same thing, the background with the butterfly print plays as the light, and this one is a little bit darker, so it plays as my dark. And then we did the same thing here. So light for the background fabric, dark for the crisscross, light here and dark in comparison to the background fabric, right, for the crisscross. This one was actually hand quilted. We quilted the front, which would be like a quilt top, say the pillow top, to batting, and then we turned it into a full envelope pillow cover, but it's fully bound here, okay? So that's gonna be one way that you can finish the pillow. Another one that I have here that my friend Stacy, who was one of my sample makers and she makes stuff for me, she made this monochromatic look, and I think this was a V&Co collection. They used to come out with these, I think it was Vanessa Christensen, her fabric was called like V&Co, and they would come out with like different lines that were monochromatic. And I remember this one being like different geometric and little floral shapes of red and white. And so you can see that playing with the contrast, this sample that Stacy made is the same. So you have a light background, the dark crisscross, and then it goes opposite. So dark background, light crisscross, and that's how you get that bold look. I think that turned out super cute. This one was not done as a pillow cover. Instead, she stuffed this one and then put one of these little like, what do they call these little, it's like a button that goes through here to hold it, to kind of pull it in on the inside through the center. But that's just to give y'all another visual and another idea. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for tuning in. Susie says, I love monochromatic. Awesome. Okay. Yes, Zena says, I love that red and white. And you could do that with black and white. You could do it with like grayscale neutrals. You know, that would look really good. As long as you're playing with one light, one dark, you're going to get that pop and that visual interest. I'm going to be playing with the lights and darks today, but I'm using Halloweeny fabrics because I need to make some throw pillows for the couch. Let me take a sip of water and then we're going to start. Okay. So my 10-inch slicer ruler, and I'm not going to go in through a whole demo of like the basics of how you use it because I have a full video library. You can type in Crafty Gemini 10-inch slicer and it's in the chat. Okay, so we put the link in the chat for y'all. And even on YouTube, I have a full video playlist. So you can check out Crafty Gemini 10-inch slicer videos. And myself and some other bloggers and YouTubers have created even different video tutorials on how to use it. So there's lots of different ways. Again, we have them in the shop. And it's a Crafty Gemini exclusive. We designed it, and I have it manufactured here in the US. So the only place really that you can get them now, unless a couple of my wholesalers still have it, is from our website. Okay? So here's what I'm working with. These two. Isn't that cute? I would recommend if you're going to use a print that has some type of a floral or graphic like I showed you earlier, the butterflies or something like that, make sure that it's a non-directional print. It's just going to make things easier. So with my little black cats and stars and moons here, you can see that they're going every which way. And I'll show you in the fabric itself. They're all tossed around. So it doesn't really matter how I cut it or how I piece the blocks together. They're going to be going all different ways. Now, if all the cat's red from top to bottom, it would look a little bit wonky because you're chopping this up and you're ending up with 4 different cuts. And so you may end up with like an upside down motif or text and things like that. If you don't really care and you're trying to get a kind of sprinkled all over look, that will work. But if it's going to be like your first time working on something like this, I definitely recommend you use non-directional prints. Okay. Yes, Liz Wilson has been around for a long time here. She says, I remember the pillows. I made the one with the staggered arrows. Okay, that was one of our quilts called Any Which Way Quilt. I remember that too. Okay. Yes, Deborah, that's awesome. She says, wow, I love them. They're going to look great in my RV in some kind of camping theme. That would be such a cute way, especially if you have kind of some specialty fabrics that maybe you don't have a ton of to make an entire quilt. This is a great way to kind of add a little bit of a pop of color, some fun prints or motifs in your fabrics in something small, right? Like a little throw pillow. Okay, so the first thing that you would need to do is to cut your yardage up into 10-inch by 10-inch squares because a 10-inch slicer is designed to work with 10-inch squares. So whether you have already, you have a pack of pre-cuts that are 10 inches by 10 inches, or you're going to cut your own, that is what you're going to want to do. Now, I'm going to use a different fabric here, just because I want to show you how you would pre-cut this. The yardage that I have for these 2 prints, it's like a huge thing and it's not going to fit in the camera shot. So I'm just going to scoot these out the way. And this is not quite a full piece, so it'll work a little bit better to show you all. So when we get our fabric from a shop, whether it's online or in person, you're going to have selvages on 2 edges. So from selvage to selvage is going to be the width of the fabric. And mine is not the full width because I've already cut off of this edge. But the idea is that you would have this folded up with the 2 selvages up. And you don't want to necessarily match your selvages, but what I do is I kind of hold the corners with my fingers like this, and I will let it hang. If I see the fabric kind of skewing in one direction, like that, then I know that it's off grain. So I lift it up in the air and I let the fabric hang where it wants to, and whether or not the selvage edges match is irrelevant to me at least. Then you can take your water if you like to steam. I like to use starch. Oop, I almost dropped it. And just give it a good spritz. I'm going to kickstart my iron here. And I'm just going to starch it. Flip it so I don't mess with the fold. And then we're just going to dry this up real quick, trim off the edge, and I'm going to show you how I like to start cutting out my 10-inch by 10-inch squares, okay? So that you would know if you have yardage, and it doesn't have to be a lot of yardage. If you have like half a yard, you can get started and cut some up. You really only need, for the front, if you're just making a pillow cover, you would just need 4 10-inch by 10-inch squares, and then 1 additional 10-inch by 10-inch square of whatever that fabric is that you're going to inset into the crisscrosses. So you don't need much. You really could get away with, if you have scraps that are yardage strips, a 10-inch strip of fabric by the width of the fabric. out of one of those, if it's a, quality quilting cotton, you should be able to get at least 4 out of there, because it usually ranges between 40 to 45 inches or so in width. Okay, and if we divide that by 10, you get 4, and you'll have a little left over, so you can get all of them. Out of this one, because this is not the full width of the fabric, I'm not, maybe, we'll see how much is cut off of here. I may or may not be able to get the 4 squares, okay, but I'm going to show you that. And so because we're working with pre-cuts, those of you that maybe are familiar with my 10-inch slicer and have already made the more basic design, the sliced quilts that I have back up here on a wall, we can't really show you right now, but you can see it on the website. And you may be familiar with making that one where we slice it and we just put one little slice of fabric inside. Well, then we turn it and we're going to add another strip of fabric, is the technique that we're using here to make this octagon shaped quilt top, if you will. Okay, so that's crispy. You can see that it doesn't match up here. Okay, I'm not going to force it. Instead, remember, I pulled like this on the corners and I let the fabric fall where it wanted to, and that is where it wanted to. So that's what we're keeping. So that tells me that I need to trim off a little bit off this edge, and I'm going to take a long strip ruler here and just shave off the smallest amount possible in order for me to get a straight edge. And all I'm doing is aligning one of the straight lines on my ruler with the fold. Okay, so now that I have a clean edge, we need to measure over 10 inches. So I like to use my Crafty Gemini 5-inch by 10-inch ruler, which is perfect for this because I can cut my own yardage down into 10-inch squares, 10-inch strips like I'm about to do, or once I have the 10-inch strip cut, I can subcut it down into 5-inch by 5-inch squares as well. So really handy ruler. I know a lot of you really like it. And I always have 2 at least up here because it's not a huge ruler either. Okay, so I like to slide my rulers back and forth. I know not everybody does. I like to slide them so that I can make sure that I'm maintaining that 10-inch chunk that I want to cut all the way up to the top. When you're spanning a long chunk like this, even if the ruler feels like it's straight, sometimes it can be a little bit askew all the way at the top, and you won't know it until you cut the strip and then realize it's maybe 1/8 of an inch larger at the top. So that's just one of my reasons for sliding the ruler up. I know some people like to use rulers that have grip or put little grippy things underneath it. This is just how I do it. And y'all know cutting is my most favorite part of any quilting or making process. All right, so this edge doesn't have the selvage already, and this one does. So I'm just going to pull this up here, line this up nice and straight so I have a 90-degree angle here, and I'm just going to trim off the selvage edge because I do not want to work out any of my math or my measurements with that selvage in there. Okay, now I will like to keep the strip folded up because that means that every cut I make, I will be able to get 2 out of it, right? Because it's doubled up and there are 2 layers right here. So now I have 10 inches from here to here. So now I'm going to go in and cut 10 inches over, okay? So a few different ways you can do this. If you're using the 2 ruler method that I often use, we use 1 ruler to cut and another ruler to measure. So if I'm using, like I said, I keep 2 of these on hand. If I have my 5-inch by 10-inch Crafty Gemini ruler here, I'm going to measure the whole thing as 10 inches. So I know I can start the ruler all the way here and bring it over to here. Again, I'm going to slide it just to make sure this is right all the way to the top. And it is. So this is the ruler I used to measure, and now that I have measured and it's exactly the 10 inches I need, I can get rid of it. And because I had bumped this one right next to it, that's going to allow me to maintain that measurement and cut right there, okay? And then let's see, I don't think we have enough here to cut another 10-inch, but yep, we don't. We have like 9 1/4. So the way I would be able to do it is just to cut 1 more. So instead of getting 4, because I didn't have the full width of the fabric, I can just cut at 10 inches over like this, okay? So same thing, measure my 10. I would press this little crease out just because it's bothering me, but just so that you all see, because I'm not using this fabric in this project anyway right now. So slide, slide, slide. Okay. And so then you have your 10-inch by 10-inch squares. And so you would repeat that to get however many pre-cut 10-inch squares that you needed to work on your project, okay? Yes, Winless Original says the two-ruler method is very helpful. It is, and I find that it helps because you don't have to be counting backwards. Oftentimes, we're manipulating these rulers and we're thinking, okay, if I start it here, it's at 8, and I need 4 inches, so I need to count back. 8 minus 4 is 4. And so for people that don't love math, like I do, I know it can be a little bit confusing, and it's always just easier if you're looking at the numbers to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? In the same way that we're used to counting, you know that from 0, from where the ruler starts, to 4 is the 4 inches that you need, versus doing math. If you have a 12-inch ruler, you're going back minus 4, you should stop at 8, and it can just get really confusing, okay? Oh, awesome, Pam. She says, I love my 5-inch by 10-inch ruler. It's always right next to my cutting table and is my go-to. I love to hear it. Awesome. Okay. Francoise says you should use your magnetic mat. I was going to, but listen, the amount of stuff I have on this table, I will not be able to move it out of the way. And the reason I'm not going to use it right now for this demo is because we're using my 10-inch slicer, which requires, or kind of recommended, a rotating mat. And the magnetic one is not a rotating. So I'm going to use my Martelli mat today, okay? So now, let's grab the Martelli mat. And we put a link to this. We used to carry it in our shop. But the link that we've included here today in the description box is to my Amazon affiliate link where y'all can find it because we don't have any in stock right now. So the top, this is called the Martelli Roundabout. The top is a cutting mat. Underneath it, you have an ironing board, a dirty one like mine because I use it a lot. And then underneath that is the spinning platform. So you keep them stacked like this. And it just saves space for me to do the cutting, scoot it out, press real quick, put this back. So that's what I'm going to be using today. Okay, y'all? So now, say you have your 2 fabrics, and what I think I'm going to do is just work on the 4 squares of this guy because I want to get one done. I'm going on a trip tomorrow, and I have so much stuff to do. So let's see if we can get this done, at least the top of it. So here's one of the blocks done, okay? And I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to make this exact one. So you can see, first of all, the difference in size from the pre-cut 10-inch square. It does shrink down a little bit, right? Because we're cutting, we're inserting stuff, and that means we have seam allowances here, here, and here, and here. Okay, so it is going to shrink down a little bit, and there will be some trimming up that you need to do. However, I designed the 10-inch slicer. There is a 5-inch slicer, though, a teensy one, that's designed for 5-inch by 5-inch pre-cut squares. But this guy, I designed it because a lot of my students, and this is kind of like at the peak of pre-cuts. Everybody was ordering these 10-inch by 10-inch square pre-cuts with fabrics that match beautifully, and they were saying every project that they would look up, any pattern, it would say you need a stack of pre-cuts and then an additional 3 yards of background fabric. And so it was kind of like when the inspiration strikes and you want to start cutting into your pre-cuts, if you didn't have a large amount of yardage to use as background fabric, it's like you couldn't use them. So that's when I started coming up with the design for this ruler so that you could make a bunch of different designs using the pre-cuts and have minimal to no waste. Most of the designs that I teach for the ruler have 0 waste. This one, because we're kind of chopping it up and turning it, we're going to have a little bit more waste, but I think it turns out lovely. Okay, so we have our 10-inch by 10-inch square, okay? And I'm going to try and walk you through like this so that you can kind of understand how it all comes together, and it tends to be a little bit easier for when you're doing it at home. Let me make sure this is in the shot. Okay, if you can see here, the X that I have, this one is solid, right? And this one gets cut because this comes in last, right? So in other words, if I turn it this way, you know that the one that's underneath, that's the chop strip, is the one that I inserted first. So if you start making this and you kind of forget, or you're looking at the done blocks and you're thinking, I don't even, you set it aside and you're like, I don't even remember what I did. This is what I'm showing you here, is how to kind of mentally deconstruct what you've done to figure it out. So if I position my 10-inch slicer ruler here, I know that that's the first cut that I made into my piece because the one that's underneath was the one that was firstly inserted. So let's go there. We have our 10-inch square. I want you to put the narrow portion of the ruler closest to your body. And this is a 90-degree corner here and here. So align it so that it matches the top. And if your squares were cut good, it should line up right there because it's 10 inches, okay? Line it up on the side, line it up on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to make this cut. And I'm just going to separate it so you can see that there's a slit there. Okay, then I'm going to lift up my ruler and I'm going to turn this around. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. Narrow edge towards me, but now on the opposite side. So I'm aligning at the top, the side again, and the bottom. And so you're basically using it to make, this is going to be the first step of this block, is making my sliced quilt. Okay, this is the most basic way to use it, like this. So now we have used the ruler as a template, right? We've cut out the full shape of it on one side and on the opposite side, and what we have left over just happens to be this strip. Okay, so that is where you would take this strip out and insert another one from another fabric that you cut the exact same way, and you could insert it here and sew it back together to make my sliced block. Okay, so now I'm going to take this out of here because obviously we're going to be inserting a different fabric, so I'll show you how to cut that one. So now I took away the strip. I'm going to set these two guys aside. I'm going to leave them in the same orientation, and then let me grab my square here. Remember I said you need 4 squares to make the 4 blocks that are going to make the octagon, but then we also need an additional square of whatever the fabric is you're going to use for the strips. Okay, so in my case, I have one of each because I'm kind of alternating the strips for the 2 different types of blocks I'm making. But here is how you would cut this. You get your 10" by 10" square, and this is 10 inches from here to here. It was, because I already cut a strip from here, okay? But you basically are going to position the ruler, and this one I'm going to continue to cut more strips so you can see how I do it. From where the bottom point is to here, it needs to be 1 1/4 inches wide. That is the width of this strip. So if you're making a lot of identical blocks, you need to continue cutting them at the same angle and the same width. Okay? So I'm just measuring here that 1 1/4, so that's good. And then make sure that it's aligned at the bottom. Make sure that it's aligned at the top. My square is not perfectly square there. But then at the top also, from that point over, should be the 1 1/4. Like that. Like that and like that. Perfect. So now I hold my ruler there and I make that cut. So that's 1. And I can make a few more if I know that I'm going to make, say, 4 blocks that are identical, right? Same background, same background fabric and same strips. So I'm just going to line it up right where I need it. Good. And then turn it in here. If you have it on a cutting mat, like the green ones that have a lot more lines, I'm not really using the lines that are on this rotating cutting mat because I have it all off. But if you use those lines, you can use those to do your 1 1/4 measurement as well. Okay. So now I know that these 2 strips have the right angle and they're the right width that I need so that my crisscrosses match up. So now here's what we're going to do. We take the same backgrounds of the first kitty fabric that we cut, and we're going to position it like this. Everything pretty side facing up so you visually see if you have the pieces oriented correctly and all the angles and all that match. Okay. So now we're going to piece these together. So for this, and this is something that I always say in the tutorials, is I like to use a glue basting technique. So you can use a washable Elmer's glue just like this. If you're in the US, you can get this anywhere. Okay, and I like to use a little really fine tip on here, which of course I went to use mine and it's fully clogged and I didn't have time to run it through the hot water, but I took out the piece that's actually sitting in hot water out there to get all the washable glue out and dissolved. Say what? No, it's fine. And so the tip, you'll have a little tip kind of like this, but that sticks out here. It just is going to allow you to get a finer line of that glue to come out of here. These tips, you can get them from my friend Laura in her Etsy shop, and we have linked to that in the description box below as well. I know sometimes we talk about them on the show here, and she's sold out, but right now she has them in stock. So we'll put the link in the chat and y'all can check that out. For now, I'm just going to be super duper careful and not squeeze this bottle too much because this one was a new bottle and it's not clogged. Okay. That's the cool thing about those though. They're stainless steel and plastic. So you just take apart all the pieces and just leave it in some warm or hot water and all the glue just dissolves off and then you can just let it dry and put it right back on. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. And one of the reasons I like to use the glue for glue basting, and if you have, your own favorite glue, there's oftentimes, let me find them. I use glue a lot, okay, in a lot of different stuff. And let me just grab a couple different ones here to show you. Because if you are not a quilter, or maybe you've not done, say, foundation paper piecing or English paper piecing or some of these techniques that you often see glue used in, you may be like, are you kidding me? This girl's using glue? Yes, people have been using this for decades, okay? Probably like 50 years. It's fine. It's washable. It comes out. And as long as it's dry before it goes under your needle, as you'll see when I sew the seam up, it's okay. Okay, so Sewline makes their own glue stick. Now this glue, you see how the tip is wider? You'll have to either like run it on its side like that to get just a skinnier bit of the glue to come out. So that's why I don't go to this on a narrow scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. This one is by June Taylor. It's a temporary fabric glue stick. Same thing, this is more like a school glue stick, and because it's such a wide applicator, again, you would have to go like this on the side. So you could do that if you want to. There's lots of different glue basting options. There's some more fancy, expensive ones. This is my preferred when it's tiny, of course, with the fine line glue tips from Laura's shop. But I mean, you're not trying to have like a whole thing of glue on here. You can just do some dots. And when you have those the fine tip on it, it just comes out in like barely a bead, and that's what you want. So I put the glue on that side. Now I'm going to take the strip, flip it, and I'm matching it point to point. So point from the edge that needs to touch, and I'm just lightly pressing this down, aligning the raw edges. Do not stretch this strip. That is going to be my #1 tip for y'all. Although it's not cut on exactly a 45-degree angle, this is cut on an angle, and it is a bias edge. If you stretch this, it's a wrap for you, okay? So now that I have pressed this, my glue, it's probably kind of almost dry right now because it was such tiny little beads of glue, but I always like to go in with the heat of a dry hot iron. No steam here. And I'm just adding that on top, like the base of the iron, so that it can help dry that glue up. And then I feel comfortable and safe to go ahead and sew. Another thing, if you feel like you put too much glue, please do not sew through it because that will gum up your needle. If you put 1, 2, 3, 4 little dots, just hit it with the iron, it's gonna hold. And the idea is that the glue is holding in place of pins. When we're working on a lot of assembly line style blocks like this, where we're doing the same thing over and over again, you could cut up all your 10-inch squares, cut up all your strips, and prep a ton of blocks just like this. And that way you don't have to worry about pins. You don't have to worry about possibly distorting this edge as you're going to sew. Because as you know, anything cut on the bias, if your sewing machine has too much chomp from the presser foot down onto the fabric layers, that can also stretch the fabric as it's feeding through with the feed dogs. Okay, so be careful. I don't want you messing with that. Now I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch, and on my machine, I'm working on the Juki LB5020. I need to move my needle position over to 5.0, which scoots it over to the right, so I can still use the regular universal foot, and that makes it so it's a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And then I just shortened the stitch length to a 2mm stitch length, which is nice and short. I have 100% cotton thread in here. This is a Wonderfill Confetti with a K, and I don't know what colors we have left, but we may have some still in the shop. So now I'm just sewing along the side. And the glue makes sure that nothing is stretching, nothing is distorting, and it's right where I need it to be for sewing, okay? Now, after I stitch the first seam here, I go in and press, and of course, if you have a tailor's clapper, grab it. By the way, we restocked these. I think we still have some left. We had a wait list, so I know some people snagged them. But if you need a small tailor's clapper, you can check that out at our shop too. So after I sew, I press, and then I'm going to press the seam allowance to the larger piece of the background, just so that I don't mess with that other edge by stretching it. So I lift on the side that I want the seam allowance to be pressed to, and then I go in with the side of my iron and just press. Here, if you have a steam iron, you could, say, blast it with some steam, because now it doesn't matter. The glue doesn't have to stay dry necessarily right now because we've already sewn, okay? So if you like to use steam to help set your seams, you can do that there. Okay, so that's one. Now let's grab the other side. Where'd you go? Here. So now I need to do the same thing to stitch this to the other side, okay? So same thing. Make sure I don't squeeze too much. Just a couple dots. If you have that fine line glue tip, definitely use it because it is more than worth it. Again, you can get it from my friend Laura's Etsy shop. Her shop name is Dragonfly Quilt Works, and we have a link for that. in the description and the caption. Again, I'm matching point to point, and I say that because I don't want y'all to get confused because of all the angles going on. When you look at it like this, it looks like, oh no, surely I'm sewing it wrong, right? Because you're used to sewing pieces that are matching up along the top and bottom edge. But because of these angles, we're not. So point to point. And don't worry if everything's not super perfect. It won't be if you're using store-bought pre-cuts, that's for sure. So just do what you can, and then we end up trimming it up, okay? So you'll have some wiggle room anyway. All right. Let me stitch this next one up. Oh, awesome. Star says, I just ordered another 10-inch slicer. You can never go wrong with them. And let me tell you how I know a lot of people end up using them. When you have like sewing days with friends or retreats and stuff, people will take it with them because it's just one ruler. You know you can, if you get access to the internet, you can check out the video library, see which blocks you want to make. You take a stack of pre-cut 10-inch squares with you, and then their friends are like, oh, let me get that ruler when you're done with it. I have a stack here of pre-cuts and I didn't know what to do with it. I'll chop them up while I'm here, you know? So those are, it's one of those great rulers to have for a class, for a retreat, for, you know, a sew day with some friends or family. Okay, so I like to press after I sew, y'all know that. And then again, because I pressed this one to the background fabric because it was a bigger chunk, and in this case it happens to be the darker fabric, you know, quilters love to say press to the dark. I press to wherever I need it to press so that I don't distort my fabric. So I'm pressing it to the background fabric again. On the opposite side this time, and then we're going to give it a good press with the clapper too. Okay. Oh, Eunice says, I use double-sided wash-away tape. Yes, you can go through that stuff quick on seams like this. But if you use like a little piece here and there, that would be plenty to help hold it in place. All right, let's see. Just making sure I'm not missing any questions here. Okay. Oh, hi, Miss Bernadine. She says, I'm late, but I'm here. Awesome that you can join us. Let me grab my cutting mat again. So now, this is the basic sliced block. Ta-da! You can make a bunch of these and have a little Halloween-y quilt hanging. You know, quilt hanging. Hanging quilt, a wall hanging. That's what I meant to say. But you can make these out of any fabrics, anything. Anything you wanted to, for any holiday, for any birthday, for any occasion. So now, we have that one done. But I want to turn it, and I'm going to hack at it again with my rotary cutter and my 10-inch slicer. Where'd you go? Okay, so now, if we analyze which way this is going, you can see that that one we mentioned was underneath and got installed first is this guy. So I'm orienting it that same way. So now I need to come in here and chop this way so I can insert it in the opposite way and get myself that little crisscross that I want with the X, okay? So if I take my ruler here, I see that this is what I did. So we're going here to cut in here. So now the narrow edge is away from me, but I recommend that you trim up the ends here before we go any further. And you'll see why after when we get to the second part. The 10-inch slicer is little. I mean, it's only 10 inches tall, but it still has a 90-degree angle corner, so you can use it to square up some of these smaller blocks. So this right angle corner here, I'm going to align it here and here. The bottom, at the top, it's right at 9 inches. So I'm just going to trim off this little bit. Same thing on the opposite side. And you're just trimming off the sides that are affected by the seam that we sewed, okay? All right, so then we said we're going to come in here. It was this way. We're going to put the narrow edge away from us this time. And I'm going to line up with the side and the bottom here. And you can use this ruler facing up or facing down. So in this case, I have it upside down. Okay, so the words are backwards on it. But you just place it where you need it. Because you know when we make this cut, we're using it more as a template than we are as a ruler. Because we're not really taking any measurements here. So now I have another slit, right? And then we're going to come in here and position this guy in there. Cool, right? So let's do the same thing with our glue. Point to point. Don't stretch it, remember. All right, let's press it so we can dry that glue and set it in place. And it just takes a little. If you do a minimal amount of glue, you don't need to heat it up too much. And then we're going to do this right here. Oh, awesome, Linda. She says, I just got my 10-inch slicer. I can't wait to see what you make with it, girl. Okay. So now we press, press, press away, clap. So again, I lift up the side where I want the seam allowance to go to. That way. Come on, seam allowance. Okay, clap it. And now I'm going, oh, the wrong one. Didn't mean to take that off. I meant to put on the cutting mat. Now, again, I'm going to trim off the sides before I go in and add the other side. And the main reason for this step here, for trimming it up, is so that when we come in here with this, if you don't trim it up on the top and the bottom, what happens is it's going to be harder for you to visually see where this end should be. So if you slide a little bit too high, you won't get the intersection that you need for the X. Does that make sense? Like it'll end up being higher up than here. Or if you slide it a little bit down because you see that you have more fabric edge left, if you go this way, you may end up further down. So you want to have it right here so that this looks like it's seamless, although it was pieced together in two halves, right? So we definitely want to come in here and trim this. And again, I'm going to use just the right angle corner of my 10-inch slicer to get a straight cut there. And the same thing on the other side. So for this side, I'll just place it on any of the straight lines on my ruler and then along the edge here, and that gives me the straight edge that I need. Okay, and then again, right here. So you see how that's going to match up, and then once it's in place, it's going to look like that's, you know, like an X that's almost appliqued on, but obviously we know we pieced it. And the less glue you use, if you're using a glue basting technique, the better. I think I had two glumpy bits there on the last seam that made it a little bit stiffer for when I was trying to press that seam allowance. Minimal, minimal, and do not stretch. That's what it's helping you to do really, is to secure everything with no pins and help you to not distort all these angled edges, raw edges, okay? Oh, thank you, Karen. You're sweet. She says, Vanessa, you amaze me. Love, love your free and paid for videos. I learn something every time I watch you. I'm glad to hear it. Sometimes I'm just like, I won't do that. Nobody needs to know that. Or like, oh, that's not a big enough lesson, you know, or like a good enough tip. Or sometimes I feel like that. So I'm glad to hear that even on the days where I probably feel like I'm not teaching anything, some of you out there are actually getting something out of it. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch this seam up and then give it a press, and this block is going to be done. And then I'm going to see what I feel like doing. I'm not sure if I'm going to make 4 blocks or 2 and 2 or what. Let's see. Because I definitely, I mean, one pillow is just going to be made up of 4 blocks, so that's not going to take long, even if I don't make them all on here since it's already 4 to 40. Okay, so I'm pressing, grab my thread snips. And if you need some good thread snips, we have these guys in the shop. They're all metal. They're super good. I keep at least 3 probably all in my little cubbies here. All right. So now I'm pressing this way, and you may be wondering why I'm pressing out. Earlier I mentioned that I pressed to the bigger side because the strips were so narrow and I just have more fabric here to hold. It also happened to be that I was pressing to the dark fabric, okay? In this case here, I'm pressing to where there's less bulk, okay? So let's think about it. If I press the seam allowance from any of the strips in towards the strip, like this, those seam allowances are almost touching. So you could do that, but you know, sometimes we have projects where like it's almost overlapping and it's just easier to press them out to help this kind of spread open a little bit more. So it's kind of up to you and, you know, however many blocks you end up doing. plus the rows and the layout of your project. But I just want to kind of let y'all know and walk you through mentally why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing, because that's the way that I think about it, okay? My little kitties, they look so cute. Okay, so now I have another block. So let's see. So I have these two. So if you follow the steps as I'm covering them here, you can end up with as many blocks as you want, but they are going to be identical blocks, okay? As you see here, the X's are all going in the same way, okay? So if you wanted to start, I mean, wouldn't that make a super cute quilt though? Like a bunch of these like that. They almost look like branches or twigs and would make for a really good spooky Halloweeny quilt. If I turn them this way, you see that these don't match up here and the X's are going that way. If you go like this is where they start to mirror image one another and you can make them match up. So this is the pillow that I think I'm going to make, where I end up making that octagon shape here and here. And then we turn it this way. Do you see how now this matches here? But the important thing to note here is that because we started off with 10-inch squares, we cut one way, we inserted a strip. You now have where one edge of the block measures 10 inches, but the other one is less because remember I said it's shrinking since we are taking up seam allowances at every seam that we sew, okay? Then we turned it, we cut again, and we had 2 more seam allowances, so it's shrinking up. Because we started off with a square and we have all these seams in here, they're not gonna be square, which is okay. Depending on how your layout of these blocks is going to be, you can trim them up or not. So for example, if you were making a bunch of blocks like this and you wanted them all just to look like that, you don't really need to trim them up. You can clean up a little bit here and there, give everything a good press, and then just sew them to each other, right? Rows across, and then connect the different rows to make the full quilt top. If you're wanting to do, like I'm gonna do here, this octagon shape, I'm turning, they're rectangles, okay? I'm turning one, so now vertically the rectangle is going this way long ways, and to make it match up so that the shape of it is mirror image, it's going this way. So what do I need to do? I need to trim them up as I connect them. And you'll see that in the video course. If you get the 10-inch slicer ruler, on the sticker label on the front, it has the link on where you can go. You just scroll, scroll, scroll. You'll see all the video lessons for different ways that you can use the ruler, and all these steps are in there so that you can see how I trim them up and how we do it, okay, to make the pillows that I showed earlier. For those of you that are just tuning in new, we are working on octagon shaped pillow cover like this. And this is what I'm talking about, having the points match up so that you end up with these 1, 2 sides per 4 blocks, okay? Awesome. Hi, Nancy. She says, I got my ruler ordered. I'm excited about a new quilting project. Yes, and these are good kind of potato chippy projects, right? You just make a couple blocks and next thing you know, you have a pillow. You don't feel like you had to tackle a quilt for 9 months. But they're still, we're using some quilting techniques to make this, piecing it, and it's just fun to play around, I think, with the angles and some cute fabrics that you might have in your stash, okay? So this is the octagon that I'm talking about on the inside here. If you really wanted the interior to be totally different, I mean, there's so many different ways that you could use the ruler. I'm just trying to share with y'all a couple of different options so that once you have the ruler in hand, or for those of you that have had it for years, you can take it out from the drawer and start making something and put it together to make yourself some little, home deck type accessories for your couch or your bed or whatever. Depending on the holiday, you can use some cute fabrics. Okay, so these are 2. I want to make, I think, 2 more like this. And then I'm going to make a whole separate pillow. Obviously, I'm not going to do that right now with y'all, but that is going to be my plan. I'm going to make 2 more blocks like this and then put them here so that the whole pillow is this and the octagon will be in the center. That way, notice what I'm working with here is the value of the fabrics, darks and lights. You go with a dark fabric for the background and use the same fabric for the crisscross X, and look how it just pops. It almost looks like a little bit of a web. Right? Almost like geometric, kind of like a web, which I think is very on theme for my Halloweeny pillows here. Anyway, I'm going to make 2 more blocks like this, and then I'm going to put them here. And then of this one, I'm going to make 3 more blocks so that I can do the exact same thing. If you wanted to alternate one, either scrappy like I did for the other pillow or something like this, you could do this and then have one of these guys be here. That's super bold looking. So just imagine the different colors that you could use. You can make this look super modern and use solid fabrics to have this kind of geometric quilt design for the front of the pillow with some solids. I think that would look super cool. Right? Yes, Windless Original says that's going to be so cute. And I will definitely post pictures. I'll keep y'all posted, and I'll post the pictures of the finished thing. And yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. Maybe not like this. A little bit too checkery for me for these prints. But yeah, so I'm going to do 2 this way and then the other 2. So let me go through real quick, and I'm just going to show you how I would trim it up. If this was the first row across, right, and then I would have 2 more that went like this under, I'm going to trim them up 2 at a time, because my key thing to that I want to focus on per each step is the intersection here. I don't want these to be connected like that. Okay? I don't want them to be like this. I want them to match up so that it looks almost like an applique motif on top of that background print. So there's, several ways you can trim it up. You can match it up like this and go by the shorter measurement. So this one is where I want it to be, the one on my right, the block here. And I'm going to measure it because this guy is bigger. So if I can measure this edge and trim this one to that same size while they match like that, then I know they're going to match up, right? So we're going to go here, here, and you can see it measures exactly 9 inches. That's pretty easy. So if I match this guy up, and look at me flipping this, and then I trim it right here across, that is going to give me exactly the 9 inches that I need. So to get the trimming down, there's a couple things you can do. One, I can, first of all, clean this up so that I have a nice straight edge here. That's going to help me out for sure. Now I can match them up. You can put glue along this edge and press it so that it's exactly matching, so you know it's not going to move on you like that. Or you can do what I'm about to do and turn it this way. I have these guys matched up, and I'm just going to take a long strip ruler and my rotary cutter and tell this, do not move. If I had my magnetic cutting mat here, I would definitely put some of those magnets right in place. That would be really helpful to do that. Okay, so that's right there. And then I'm just going to align it right up the side. I have one of the straight lines on my ruler going right there. And I'm just going to shave off whatever's at the top. Okay, so that's going to look good. And then we can turn it around and do the same thing to the other side. That way we're trimming it before we even sew it, because we're trimming visually. Like, okay, if this starts here and it's going to end right here where I'm cutting it, I know that when I go to sew it, as long as I'm careful to make sure that I stitch right at these intersecting points, then I know everything is going to turn out for me. Okay, so now I cut here, and I just kept going because there was a little bit there that was off. How cute does that look? Love it. Okay, so let's go ahead and sew these 2 together, because all I'm going to do once I get off of this live is make 2 more. Now, I'm trying to match up the intersections here. Because I pressed my seams, and this guy, I don't know why it got pressed back, because half of it is pressed that way, the other half is not. Notice I still have a chunk here that needs to be trimmed up, but I'm going to leave that for now. I'm more worried about matching up this intersection. Here, again, you could do glue. You could do a couple of really sharp, if you have like fine glass head pins, like the clover ones that we carry in our shop. Those are awesome for this because they're going to be so light and thin. You can put it right where you want it to match up. I'm going to put a little bit of glue and try not to put too much. I'm going to go the whole way, but I'm going to focus on pressing the edge, or excuse me, the seam intersection here first, because I don't care too much about the other stuff. You can even pull to make some things fit, but this intersection right here, it's got to be spot on for me. Okay, now I'll worry about the rest of the seam edge. Let's dry that glue with our iron. Looks good. And you'll want to make sure that you are working on that consistent scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, y'all. Because here, again, because of the width of the strips, they're pretty narrow. The more you are inconsistent with the seam allowances, the more obvious it's going to be the intersections like of the strips. You might be able to see that one strip is like wider or skinnier than the other if the seam allowances are not consistent. So your best bet is going to be, you know, to get some of that practice in with the consistent seam allowance, okay? So let's stitch this up. I just flew past that intersection. Let's hope that that glue set and it didn't move on me. All right. Thread snips. Let me see. Winless Original says, can I ask about that gold iron you were using in the Bag Club teaser video? So speaking of the Bag Club teaser video, we have a new Bag Club that's almost ready for signups. If you're not on our email newsletter list, definitely get on it. You can go to craftygemini.com/newsletter, get on the email newsletter, because when we announce it to our whole email list, ooh, that looks good, we'll send out the early bird sale price information for you to sign up. Now, the iron I was using there, and I'm going to see if I can roll it over. I don't tend to talk about it much. I got it this year, and I'm still using it for different stuff. It's a Laura Star. It's a super expensive iron, y'all. It's like almost $1,000. But it just blasts steam like nobody's business. So y'all know that my regular irons, I do not put steam, or excuse me, I don't put water in them because we have well water here. So that Laura Star one, I do put water in it because that's what it's for. It's like for steaming garments and you know, that kind of stuff. So I just have them both set up here because, well, not at the same time because I'll blow a fuse. They're pretty strong irons. But yeah, I use that one when I need like a blast of good watery steam. And then I use this one if I'm just starching or I'm using like a spray mist bottle with just some water to steam like in a spot. But if I'm pressing creases out of a large amount of stuff, a big yardage or something, I use that one. Okay. Oh my gosh, Nancy says, I've never made a pillow before. And I have so many pillow tutorials, Nancy. You'll definitely have to check them out. Doesn't that look good, y'all? So we're just going to copy and paste. Take this, and then we're going to make 2 more and put them underneath like that. And then we're going to end up with the octagon on the inside, like in this pillow. Okay? So that is going to be it for me for now, because I just wanted to show y'all, you know, how you cut the blocks up, how you use a 10-inch slicer ruler to do it. It looks more complicated than it is. Don't do like me. If you see a little thread coming out, don't pull it. Just cut it. As soon as I started yanking on that loose thread, I thought, probably shouldn't. But look how cute that looks. And I have made quilts before with this. I have to find that other quilt where I just start connecting these and they all match up as it grows and grows and grows across a big quilt. And then they start kind of falling apart. And it's called, what did I call that quilt? It's like there's no such thing as a quilt police or something like that. Because I would have that quilt hanging up in a show behind me, like at a booth or something. And people are like, whoever made that didn't match up the points, the intersections. And I'm like, actually, it was me and it was on purpose. That was the whole point. But you can make them match if you want to, like this, for that look of the octagon on the inside. Okay? So that's how you make the block to make the octagon-shaped quilt or quilt blocks for a pillow, for a quilted pillow, which is what I'm working on here. If you don't have the 10-inch slicer, you can check out the link in the description box below. So you can grab yours. We ship them to you. They're all made right here in the US. We have them manufactured here, and they're still on sale. We haven't put them up to the regular price yet, but they're still on sale. You can check them out. And like I mentioned earlier, we have a full video library of different ways that you can use this ruler, not just for different styles and types of quilt blocks, but also for zippered pouches we've used them for, right? A couple different zipper pouch tutorials. And we do have the baby brother to this guy. I don't have it right here. It's in a drawer, but it's the 5-inch slicer. So similar shape, slightly different angles, but it is designed to be used with 5-inch by 5-inch square pieces of fabric. Okay, so hopefully y'all got some tips here learning how to cut your own pre-cut 10-inch by 10-inch squares and how to use my ruler to make these cool little blocks. All right, thanks again everybody for tuning in. I appreciate y'all. Thanks for giving the video a thumbs up and for sharing it with your other crafty friends. If you're not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you click the subscribe button, and I will see y'all next week. Have a good weekend, everybody.